Thank you very much, John. Thanks for allowing me to share today. I've done quite a few versions of this talk, so you might see some slides or that look familiar. You might hear me say something that you may have already heard or think you have heard. So, but hopefully there's something new for everybody here. So my relevant professional background, again, is in statistics, and I've worked extensively in hands-on analytics in a wide variety of environments. And I've managed and coached hundreds of analytics professionals. So, and honestly, the problem with data and analytics isn't really with the data and analytics per se, but rather with the organizational infrastructure in which data and analytics live. And there's so much focus on doing data and analytics today, but that's actually the most straightforward part when it comes right down to it. There are plenty of people who deliver on data and analytics execution, and there are more data scientists and machine learning engineers than you've probably been led to believe, and that is not the problem. So, there we go. So a little bit more concretely, this is the kind of problem I tend to tackle. So every now and then you hear some market research coming out that says 60 to 70% of some sort of data initiatives just don't meet expectations. And it doesn't matter what kind of data initiatives we're talking about. And these are formal initiatives, not proofs of concept. And it's been this way for years, decades, and we haven't really seen the last of it. There's something just systematically wrong in how we've approached data, but people keep wanting to do what others are doing. And this is what, the Gartners of the world are really good at, telling you what others are doing, right? But if you do, just do what others are doing, then you're more likely to fail than to succeed, because 60 to 70%. So I've helped clients dig themselves out of this rut. Now, one client in particular went from not being able to meet any analytical objectives in a measurable way to meeting 80% of its objectives. So, remember that at the market level, the success rate is still about 20 to 30%. So these organizations that I work with tend to be like organizations that are trying to get started in data and analytics, but maybe don't know where or how to start to be successful, as well as mid-mature organizations who have been doing analytics, data and analytics for a while, but maybe have problems in getting value, or they don't collaborate well, or they have execution issues, etc. So in the size or the specific sector doesn't really matter. Small businesses and startups, all the way up to multinational corporations have the same problem, really, at the root of it. There's this fundamental misunderstanding about what data is and how analytics professionals and businesses should work together. So my mission is to close this gap between the business and the technical professionals. And on one end, I work with the business leaders to help them kind of understand how to approach data and analytics from a business perspective. And on the other end, I work with technical professionals to coach them on how to be more effective as technical professionals. And one of the key challenges with data is that there's just a lot of confusion in terminology. So I've said this elsewhere, but artificial intelligence is a concept, right? It's simply the ability or the competence that just happens to be artificial. Whereas machine learning is an approach. It's not even techniques, right? Just an approach, computational approach. And finally, data science is a discipline. So when you think about it, these terms are not directly comparable to each other. They're apples and oranges. And we get so caught up in the terminologies, but from the business perspective, they are just kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter if it's big data, data science, statistics, analytics, machine learning, business intelligence, etc. They all have the same objective, which is evidence-based decision making. And the only real difference is in the specific approach and approaches and techniques. Now, the business does not and should not really care about that. Now, unfortunately, the technical professionals have been kind of complicit in this problem. Now, some have kind of given up trying to rectify, but there are plenty of other technical professionals who don't even know the difference. So that's a kind of a big problem. Now, the size of the data, big data, et cetera, really just makes it a technology problem at the end of the day. And that just happens to broaden the range of the analytical approach in play. But at the core of it, it's still all about evidence-based decision making. And to take the idea a little bit further, now there's the raw data, which become inputs to analytical procedures, then their outputs or results lead to insights. And all of this is information just in different forms or formats, right? From the business perspective, the specific form is really a technicality. It's the utility that we're after, or should be anyways. So if we think of it like eggs, right? You could eat it raw, although personally, I don't, that's not really appealing to me. You could boil it, you could fry it, scramble it, or you could use it to make other things. But of course, information's not tangible like eggs, so that makes it a little bit harder to kind of understand or consume. Now, there is a difference between information and automation, and they are confused quite often, especially when AI, our favorite term, is involved. So automation is really a business problem, which may or may not involve data and analytics to accomplish, and it just so happens that today it often does. And analytics doesn't have to be automated. In fact, automating analytics is a business problem, not an analytical one. And it's important to be clear about if it is the automation or the information you're after. Now, honestly, I am not a fan of the expression data-driven, okay? But that's an entirely separate discussion, so we'll put it in quotes for now. So to be data-driven, you have to have the ability to use the information and the willingness to use the information. But when it comes to data, somehow people forget that these are two different things. And specifically with data, we tend to assume that willingness naturally follows ability. So what happens? We train the heck out of everybody in hopes that the ability will somehow make them want it, right? And there are many things we are capable of doing but have no desire to do. Like, I am capable technically of eating liver, but I don't really want to. And vice versa. You don't need to be a performing musician to want music. You don't need to know how to program in Python or how to build predictive models to want to make informed decisions. Now, the willingness to use information basically has two aspects, appetite and trust. So those will have to be addressed. And it's not like the field of dreams, right? They don't come just because you build it, but we've done it that way for years. And there are a lot of data products that sit on the shelves remaining unused. So a lot of the successful cases that you see are really a product of quantity over quality. It's a numbers game. So think of all this as an ecosystem or a marketplace. You can make available all the data-derived insights in the world, but without consumption by the users, without the decision makers willingly using these insights to make decisions, the marketplace is not sustainable. It's just like any other product. Now, developing a data-driven organization is not a common competency of analytics professionals. And in my experience, about, let's say 19 out of 20 are more technically oriented, more like engineers in nature. A lot of them, if engineers or not, have a really hard time even just communicating with normal people. Anyways, I spend a lot of time trying to train, how to communicate. But anyways, for the rest of us, it's important to remember that data isn't really about data. This is kind of an unintuitive conclusion, but data isn't really about data. Rather, it's about how you approach a problem. So anyone can do this, and it doesn't have to be big businesses. You can be a small business or even individual to do this. Data is simply a tool to get you there. So make sure you know what you're solving for before you solve it. And somehow people seem to think that just because data is involved, it sort of defies all laws of nature. So whenever I get involved in any sort of strategic planning, I do this facilitated exercise about what they want to do with data and analytics, because they all say, we have to be strategic about data and analytics. But when we do this, they're not allowed to use the words data, analytics, machine learning, AI, et cetera. They are to state their vision and what they want to accomplish. And people struggle with this so much. So it's important to stop talking about data and focus on approaching problems just differently. Most everything else is just mechanics. Anyways, thank you very much for your attention. And I would love to, an opportunity to discuss any questions or any thoughts that you have. Thank you.